Hello and welcome back. Today we will enter the mind, the literary mind, of Robert Browning, a very famous poet who wrote My Last Duchess in 1842. It is a rather brilliant example of the Satan effect, which is when in literature the author takes the perspective of a character who commits terrible, unspeakable acts. It allows us to enter the minds of a character who acts not as we do, who does exactly what we are told we must not do. There is something exciting about seeing into the minds of those who act against the rules of our society. My Last Duchess takes us to the 1500s in Italy, to the Duke Alfonso II of Ferrara, Italy. When he was 24, he married Lucrezia de' Medici when she was only 13. And, allegedly, he poisoned her because she looked and smiled too often at men. Of course, these are simply not claims, but accusations leveraged against him. And still, however, hundreds of years later, we don't know whether he did in fact poison his young wife when she was 16, or if she died of tuberculosis. I think that Robert Browning certainly has a perspective on the matter. So we'll hear from him first, and I shall read you this poem, and then we will work our way through it to understand exactly what he's saying about this young girl and this terrible man who wished her dead because she did not love only him, but loved everything in her short but precious life. Okay, so we'll begin. I'll read the poem first, and then we'll break it down because it's a bit complex. Robert Browning is not really an easy poet to read. Okay, now I shall read it. So pay careful attention because it's a hard poem to catch. All right, My Last Duchess. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Frau Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Will't please you sit and look at her? I said Frau Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you, but I. And seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So, not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad. Too easily impressed. She liked whate'er she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one, my favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bow of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, The white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She thanked men good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of 900-year-old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one, and say, just this or that in you disgusts me, here you miss or exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping. And I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped altogether. There she stands as if alive. Will't please you rise? We'll meet the company below then, I repeat. The Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Nay, we'll go together down, sir. Notice Neptune go. Taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which claws of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. That is the poem. I don't know how much you understood. Sometimes it can be hard when you listen to poems like that to catch their meaning, especially when they're from, as this one is, the 19th century, where there was a very particularly kind of foreign way of writing. So what we're going to do is we're going to think now about what Browning is saying and how Browning puts together this rather brilliant poem about a man who is showing off the portrait of his dead wife, which he likely, as we will see, murdered. Okay, it's actually rather a disturbing poem. So I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see the words, and I'll take you through them, and I'll do a bit of writing on the paper to show you some of the poetic choices that he made in order to pull off a masterpiece like this. Okay, let me turn it around now. Let's break this down so we fully understand it, and then when you can go back and listen to it again. And I'm going to whisper this time, so we have a bit of soft-spoken in the beginning and whispering at the end, so get a little bit of both. So let's begin analyzing the beginning of this poem to get a good understanding of what Robert Browning was accomplishing. This is, first of all, what we call a dramatic monologue. And that's a type of poetry where a speaker is a character addressing an audience. And so who is the speaker in this case? The speaker is the Duke, right, as I spoke about, but he's addressing a man tasked with arranging his next marriage. So that's kind of strange, right? We have this man who's just murdered his wife, now speaking to the man who will find essentially his next victim. Okay, let's look here. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she was alive, or she were alive. We want to pay attention to the pronouns in this case. My last Duchess implies an ownership, as you can see there. Painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. Now this is the interesting thing. Again, we want to pay attention to the pronouns. We see the painting referred to as a she, right, which only further supports this idea let's look at that temporal marking. Frau Pandorf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Now this is interesting, because he says, I call that piece a wonder now, implying that it was not a wonder before. So who made the woman a wonder? It was not the woman herself, but the artist. This here is the artist he hired to paint his late wife. And it is because of his hard work that she is now a beautiful and majestic thing. But she's hanging there on the wall, a bit like what we call a hunting trophy. Right? So she's standing there on the wall, a hunting trophy. She's dead and yet seems alive. She's been made alive by Frau Pandorf's artistry, capturing her as her husband and murderer wishes her to be caught. Okay. Now we'll skip ahead. If we were to go over every line like this, it would take us 3 hours. So skip ahead. I saw Frau Pandorf by design, for never read strangers like you. The picture counted the depths and passion for it, but myself they turned. So this is important, since none puts the curtain I have drawn for you but I. So this is saying that I am the only one allowed to look at her. And that's important, because if we remember reading it, one of the reasons that he despised her was because she would look at everyone and she would smile at everyone who looked at her. So he felt that she was not his property, but too much a free thing. So he's saying, I'm the only one allowed to look at her here. But I'm allowing you to look at her. You, the man who will find for me my next wife, you can look at her. And so they're asking, how is her such a glance, right, came there? How is it that she looks so beautiful? How is it that she has such a beautiful look, right? As it said here, the depths and passion of its earnest glance. How is it such a passionate look that Frau Pandorf has captured? And he says here, was not her presence, husband's presence only, that called that spot of joy. And it's interesting, we see spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. Frau Pandorf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's was too much. A paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half blush that ties along her throat. Here we have a bit of double meaning, right? So he's saying, paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half flush that dies along her throat. We see a bit of a revelation, right? That though he says this, he means something else. It's a bit of irony. He's saying one thing but meaning the other. He's saying that the half flush is dying, but actually, in fact, we can take it as that she was strangled, right? The Duke gives us little moments where he tells us what he has done, and so die, that diction, right? That diction points to the fact that she died along her throat, right? That was how she was killed. Strangulation, perhaps. So he then gets into her mind and says that the kindness she showed everyone was courtesy, right? Cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, and this is what's interesting, right? We stop the heart here. We have a bit of what we call caesura, I believe. Okay, these abrupt starts. The real sentence is she had a heart too soon made glad, but when we stop it, all it reads is she had a heart, which is implying that she was kind, she was good, no matter what this man might say, right? She was courteous, and she was courteous to everyone, not just the man with the money, right? So she was a very good woman, essentially, is what Browning is showing us. It slips through here. And we must remember, she was 16 years old. You have to kind of keep that in your mind. This is based off a real girl, Lucrezia, who was married at 13 and then was dead by 16. Okay. So they say, well, she had a heart, how shall we say, too soon made glad. Too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Okay, so here he's saying, my wife loved everything and everyone. She was easy, essentially, is what he's saying. Okay. And this is an absolutely beautiful part of the poem, and you might have heard it when I was reading. Breast, west, fool, mule, each speech, thanked, ranked. Right? We get this beautiful rhyming right here. And it goes all the way through here. This like beautiful, almost like nursery rhyming. It gives it a sense of, in my opinion, a kind of sordid, kind of creepy nursery rhyme feel. Creepy nursery rhyme, through the rhyming. But it also establishes the kind of beauty, because what he is speaking about is the beauty that she perceived. The dropping of the daylight in the west here is equated with his favor, right? So all of this, by her loving others, made him feel less. And so it does adorn a woman with a certain type of power, that women, by loving men and choosing only one man, gives that man his worth. When she looked other ways, she insulted him. He felt worthless. He felt equal to all the other things she laid her eyes on. And so she is a forge of God, goddess in this way. But it's a goddess whose power must be revoked in order for man to continue his own power. Or in order for man to feel a man, he must capture the power of woman, as he does in the painting on the wall. So Sir Twizzle one, my favourite breast. He is equal to the daylight in the west. He is equal to the cherries, equal to the mule. He is equal to all of it. She thanked men, right? But thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name, right? In this case, he's saying, I made her who she is. And she does not worship me because of it. Instead, it seems that she worships the world. She does not see the difference between the wealthy and the poor. She doesn't see that difference, right? And that drives him nuts, because it makes him feel as if what he has, this 900 years old name, is actually worthless. Okay? Her joy makes him feel worthless. And here he's saying, even if you had scant speech, again, this is these interjections to make your will quite clear to such as one, and say, just this or that in you disgust me, here you miss, there exceed the mark. This is how you can tell this dramatic monologue, because you have actual quotations in the line of poetry. But anyway, he's saying that I would so low as to tell her to change. Okay. I would have to stoop. There would be some pleading, right? Some please change, you're hurting my feelings, and that would embarrass him. So he's never to stoop. So he does not speak to her, is what he is saying. I chose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile, right? He's saying that, yes, she loves me, but she loves everyone. It doesn't matter. He doesn't have her. She is not caught by him because she can seek love from others. And so he says this, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. And so if we go back here, this is again, it's perhaps not irony, but rather like a double entendre. I'm trying to think what it would be called. I know the name for it, but I've forgotten it. If you know the name for it, put it in the comments, because I can't remember. But basically, he's alluding to a murder, but he's not admitting to it. So the half-flush that dies along her throat once again, you see, that half-flush dying is popping up again here. He gave a command, and then the smiles stopped. And it's interesting because we think about command being verbal, right? And he's already saying that he would not ever lessen her so. So though it's verbal, he would not lessen her. So we know he gives a command not to her, but to someone else. And that person makes her smile stop altogether. And immediately preceding that, again, we have this genre there. We have a line break. We have a sentence ending in the middle of a line. There she stands. Where does that come from? Right here. Right. There she stands. So we're cycling back to the beginning. Alright. So we say, there she stands as if alive. This juxtaposition, right? And juxtaposition, for those who don't know, right? It's a bit of a big word. It's just to put two things beside one another. For the purpose. Comparison. And that comparison is not always, well defined. So that's important to know. It's a good word to use. I like that word a lot, and not everyone knows it. So, but people use it all the time. So if you don't know it, there it is. But the juxtaposition between all smiles stopped together, and there she stands implies that he ordered her to be killed, and then he turned her into a trophy. He has finally caught her. Finally, she smiles only for him. But in order to smile only for him and only to love only him, she must die. Right? A woman is only ever truly pleasing if she is owned. And the truest form of ownership is to catch her in a painting, in an image. So we'll write that down up here perhaps, or here. poem is about. And you really see it through the conflation, right, of woman and object. And also through this, like, not so subtle irony that's going on with the Duke saying, yes, you know how her smile ended at her throat, don't you? Yes, a bit of verbal irony. Yeah, it ended at her throat because I had her strangled or poisoned or whatever. So, you'll even see, here is where he's discussing it. But what is great, his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. So when I say here, right, my kind of thesis for what this poem is about, that a girl caught in a painting, forced to watch as while as her husband or murderer chooses another girl to destroy for the sake of his own ego, we can see the woman and object. We literally see it in these last lines, right? He says, I avowed at starting is my object and his fair daughter's self. He's literally saying the next thing I shall turn into an object is this girl, as my previous object watches. It's terrifying. It's very Halloweeny, honestly. But I just want you to imagine that scene. You have this man in this kind of beautiful gallery of paintings, but all of these paintings are like people and souls that he has killed, right? That he has caught, that he's pinned up on his wall, and they're all watching as the next victim is chosen. Okay, and you see, notice Neptune though, right? Another painting. Oops, sorry, lost it. Notice Neptune though. Taming a seahorse, thought of rarity. Right, we have that word, taming. So much of these words are around enslaving, right? Something. So when we tame a seahorse, we are taking something wild and making it our own. And so all throughout you see this language repeating, a language of objectification and ownership. And so she had the kind of wildness of the seahorse, and that she loved everything, right? And yet he was able to capture it. Okay? So this is a kind of fascinating poem. And I'll stop and I'll turn the camera back around. So, I hope that analysis helped your understanding of the poem. It might be fun to listen to it again to see if you can hear some of the things, the themes that I discussed. But let me know if you like things like that. I love poetry, and I have so many different poems that I can break down. Short stories, things like that. So again, do tell me if you have also a bit of literature that you are fond of that you would like to hear annotated like so. And thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you so much, right? So wonderful. I hope you have a wonderful sleep, if that's what you're using this for. And so I'll say good night. Sleep well. Hopefully you don't have too many nightmares about the Duke. Okay. Bye everyone. Wonderful to see you.